Imagine being betrayed by your own family, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and falsely imprisoned, yet somehow rising to become the second most powerful man in the ancient world. This is the extraordinary story of a young Hebrew whose life reveals how the unseen hand of God can transform betrayal into blessing. In the royal courts of Egypt, he would one day interpret dreams that kings themselves could not understand. Through him, the future was unveiled. 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. But this account reaches far beyond personal triumph. It unfolds as part of a divine strategy, one that preserved a nation and prepared the way for the greatest rescue in history. Rejected by his brothers, yet exalted among foreigners, he became the very one who would save his family. Through tears of forgiveness and moments of divine revelation, we see how heaven weaves human choices into eternal purposes. Now picture the rolling hills of Canaan. Sheep graze across green pastures while desert winds carry stories through the air. In this land, an old father held one son closer to his heart than all the others. The boy's name was Joseph. Born in his father's old age, he carried both his mother's beauty and his father's hope. Every smile reminded the old man of the woman he had loved most deeply, a love that death could not erase. Among 12 brothers, Joseph stood apart. His father's eyes followed him with a tenderness the others never received. Corrections came gently for Joseph, but harshly for them, and jealousy began to grow, quietly at first, then stronger with every passing day. One day the father made his devotion visible. He called for master craftsmen to create something unlike anything in all of Canaan, a garment rich with color and design, woven with threads of blue like the morning sky, purple like royal robes, scarlet like rubies, and gold like the sun. When Joseph wore this robe, he looked like nobility. He walked as though marked for destiny. His brothers wore the plain robes of shepherds, but Joseph's coat declared to everyone, he was chosen. He was loved above all. The neighbors noticed. Strangers whispered. Even those passing by could see it, favoritism on full display. The robe became both a symbol of love and a burden of jealousy, a reminder to his brothers of what they did not have. Then came the dreams. Not fleeting images that vanish with the dawn, but visions so vivid they lingered all day. At 17, Joseph began to see glimpses of a future no one could yet understand. One night, he dreamed they were gathering sheaves in the field. Suddenly, his bundle of grain rose and stood tall, while his brother's bundles bowed down before it. He shared it with innocent excitement, not realizing his words would ignite deeper hatred. Soon after, another vision came, this time greater, cosmic. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. The message was unmistakable. Even his family would one day acknowledge his place above them. His father rebuked him openly. "Shall I and your mother and brothers truly bow before you?" Yet even as he spoke those words, he kept thinking, wondering, holding the meaning in his heart. But for his brothers, this was too much. Favoritism had become unbearable. Dreams of superiority too insulting. Hatred consumed them. Scripture says they could not even speak peaceably to him. What began as rivalry was now something darker, something dangerous. Every day, the brothers watched as the favored son walked proudly in his brilliant coat of many colors. They wore simple garments, stained with labor, marked by the sweat of the fields. But their father's eyes lit up whenever the favored one appeared, a glow of joy they never received. They listened as he spoke of dreams, dreams of sheaves of grain bowing down, dreams of stars bending low before him. And in those words, they heard not hope, but arrogance, not vision, but insult. The ancient record tells us their response. "Shall you truly rule over us? Shall you hold dominion over us?" Their hatred deepened, fueled by envy, resentment, and wounded pride. What began as silent bitterness grew into something living, a fire that consumed every thought. Whispers turned into schemes, resentment hardened into resolve. And when the father, blind to the danger, sent his trusted son once more on a mission, the stage was set. He was tasked to check on the flocks, to bring back word of his brothers and the herds. To the father, this seemed natural. To the brothers, it was an insult. Every visit felt like the eyes of a spy, sent to measure their worth, sent to carry tales back home. And when they saw him coming, that coat flashing in the sunlight, his steps confident with the authority of their father, they did not see a brother. They saw judgment. They saw betrayal. They saw the chance to be rid of him forever. The record declares, when they saw him from afar, even before he drew near, they conspired against him to kill him. This dreamer comes. Let us slay him. Let us cast him into a pit, and then we will see what becomes of his dreams. For weeks, perhaps months, their hatred had festered like an open wound. What began as anger over favoritism had now turned into a plot of blood. They would strike him down, hide his body in a cistern, and tell their father a beast had devoured him. The plan was cruel. It was plausible. It was final. No body would ever be found. No voice would ever speak of dreams again, and their father, broken, would believe the lie. But among them stood the eldest. He felt the burden of his position. He knew the grief this would bring their father, and though jealousy tugged at his own heart, he could not join in murder. The record shows his desperate attempt to turn the tide, to save the life of the brother they had condemned. And the eldest brother spoke up, urging them, "Let us not kill him, do not shed blood. Instead, cast him into this pit in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him." He thought he could use his role as firstborn to sway their rage, pretending to agree, while secretly planning to rescue his younger brother later. Rather than striking him down, he argued for something that felt safer. Throw him into a dry cistern. Let the pit be the instrument, not their hands. In this way, their blood would remain unstained, their guilt hidden, or so they thought. What no one knew was the eldest brother's secret. When the others left, he planned to return quietly, pull Joseph out, and bring him home. In doing so, he would save the boy, gain their father's gratitude, and perhaps restore his own place of honor. But hatred runs deeper than he imagined. The brother's jealousy was fierce, too fierce. His hidden plan would fail completely. Because while he was away, something unexpected appeared on the horizon. A caravan of traders approached, their camels burdened with spices, balm, and myrrh, headed down the long road to Egypt. Opportunity rode with them. Another brother spoke. "What profit is there if we kill him? Let us sell him instead." And the others agreed. Why not make silver from betrayal? It would remove Joseph from their lives forever and keep their hands free of blood. They pulled him from the pit, bruised, trembling, yet alive. For 20 pieces of silver, barely more than the price of a sheep, they sold their own brother into slavery. The chains were clasped, the caravan moved forward, and Joseph's journey to Egypt began. He who had once worn a beautiful coat now walked as a slave, stripped of color, stripped of freedom. Every step took him farther from his father, farther from home, farther from everything he loved. When the eldest returned to the pit, hoping to carry out his rescue, he found only emptiness. Tearing his clothes in anguish, he cried, "The boy is gone. What am I to do now?" His plans shattered. Joseph gone forever, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Now the brothers faced another problem: how to explain Joseph's absence. They slaughtered a young goat, dipped his beautiful coat in blood, and carried it home. But they didn't even speak the lie outright. They laid the bloodied garment before their father and let him draw his own conclusion. The father recognized the coat instantly. His voice broke. "It is my son's coat. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is surely torn in pieces." The old man's heart collapsed beneath the weight of grief. He tore his clothes, wrapped himself in sackcloth, and mourned for many days. Though his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused. He declared he would grieve until the day he entered the grave. The very sons who caused the wound now stood by, pretending to console the father they had deceived. Meanwhile, Joseph's new life had begun in Egypt, sold into the household of a powerful man, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. At first, just another slave among many, unable to speak the language, a stranger in a foreign land. But soon, something became undeniable. Wherever Joseph worked, gardens flourished, servants obeyed, business prospered. Everything he touched seemed to carry blessing. Even his master noticed. Trust grew quickly. Joseph rose higher and higher until he was placed over the entire household, managing every servant, every task, every responsibility. His master's estate flourished like never before, but prosperity brought a new test. Joseph had become strong, capable, and striking in appearance, and soon his master's wife cast her eyes upon him. One day, she spoke plainly. "Lie with me." Accustomed to power, she expected obedience. She was a woman who always got what she wanted. But Joseph refused. He said, "My master has trusted me with everything. Nothing in this house is withheld from me except you, for you are his wife. How then could I commit such a great wrong and sin against God?" Second, and even more significantly, he understood that giving in would be a direct offense against God, no matter what anyone else demanded or desired. The account tells us that the woman of the house did not stop after his first refusal. Day after day she approached him, pressing with every tactic she could imagine. Promises, threats, flattery, manipulation. She used them all. Her repeated failures fueled her anger. Desire gave way to bitterness. Passion turned into a thirst for revenge. She began plotting, waiting, watching for her moment to strike. But he stood firm, refusing her advances, keeping his distance whenever possible, holding to his integrity despite unrelenting pressure. One day, the house was strangely quiet. The servants were gone, occupied elsewhere. He entered to carry out his duties. She seized him by his garment, demanding her way. But his response was immediate. He tore himself free, leaving his garment in her hand, and ran outside. Now she held exactly what she needed: evidence. With his garment in her hand, she could twist the story, turning herself into the victim and him into the villain. She summoned the household staff, her voice filled with outrage. "Look," she cried. "This foreigner was brought among us to mock us. He came to force himself on me. But when I screamed, he fled, leaving his garment behind." Her story was convincing, her evidence undeniable. When her husband returned, she repeated the tale with even greater fury, making him feel responsible for bringing danger into their home. His anger ignited. Without hesitation, he ordered the young man thrown into the king's prison, the place reserved for traitors, officials, and the condemned. This was no ordinary prison. It was harsh, brutal, and unforgiving. Many who entered never saw freedom again. Once again, he had lost everything: his position, his reputation, his freedom, and seemingly, his future. Yet, even in that pit of despair, something remarkable happened. The Lord was with him, showing mercy and granting him favor in the sight of the prison keeper. The keeper soon noticed there was something different about this prisoner, something he couldn't ignore. In time, the keeper entrusted him with responsibility over all the prisoners. Whatever was done there, he was the one directing it. The prison ran smoother than ever before. Conflicts lessened. Order returned. Even in chains, he carried authority. After some time, 2 new prisoners arrived, high-ranking officials from Pharaoh's court, the cupbearer and the baker. These were not common criminals. The cupbearer safeguarded Pharaoh's drink from poison. The baker oversaw the bread served daily at the royal table. Placed under his care, he treated them with dignity, ensuring their needs were met. One morning, he noticed their faces, troubled, weary. With care, he asked, "Why do you look so sad today?" They answered, "We have dreamed dreams, but no one can interpret them." And he replied, "Interpretations belong to God. Tell them to me, I pray you." The cupbearer spoke first. "In my dream, a vine appeared before me. 3 branches budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes, pressed them, and placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand." The interpretation came quickly. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position, and you will once again place the cup into his hand." Encouraged, the baker shared his dream. "On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds ate them from the basket on my head." The interpretation was grim. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head, hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, the dreams came true. The cupbearer was restored to his position. The baker was executed. Before the cupbearer returned to the palace, the young prisoner made a heartfelt request. One final plea that he hoped would lead to his freedom. Genesis chapter 40, verses 14 and 15 tells us of Joseph's plea. "But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed, I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." Joseph gave a short explanation of his suffering. He had been taken from his homeland against his will, and now he was imprisoned for a crime he never committed. He wasn't pleading for privilege. He wasn't asking for quick release. He simply asked the cupbearer to remember him and mention his case before Pharaoh. It was a fair request. After all, Joseph had just interpreted the cupbearer's dream correctly, restoring his hope and likely saving his life. The cupbearer agreed. He walked free, restored to his post beside Pharaoh. And Joseph watched him leave, his heart stirred with hope. Surely a man helped so profoundly would remember him. Surely he would honor his word. But Genesis chapter 40 verse 23 delivers the blow. "Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him." Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, and Joseph remained in that prison, forgotten. The man he helped returned to luxury, while Joseph sat in darkness. For 2 years, he waited. 2 long years of silence. He wondered, had God forgotten him? Would he remain a prisoner forever? Life in the palace carried on with its rituals, its ceremonies, its feasts. But in the heavens, something was stirring. One night, Pharaoh himself, the ruler of Egypt, master of the Nile, lord of millions, had a dream. Not an ordinary dream that vanishes with morning light. This one clung to him, vivid and haunting. In it, he stood by the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. From the river rose 7 cows, strong, fat, and beautiful. They grazed peacefully by the meadow. Then came 7 more, skinny, sickly, horrifying to behold. And in a shocking, unnatural act, the weak devoured the strong, yet remained just as sickly as before. Pharaoh awoke troubled, but the night wasn't over. A second dream seized him. This time, 7 full ears of grain grew on a single stalk, golden, heavy, abundant. But 7 thin, withered ears appeared, and the worthless consumed the plentiful, leaving nothing behind. Pharaoh woke again, shaken, his spirit tormented. He summoned the wise men of Egypt, the magicians, The scholars, the dream interpreters, they tried everything. Rituals, incantations, ancient texts, omens, but none could give Pharaoh the answer he desperately needed. The failure spread through the palace like fire. Fear crept into the hearts of officials. If the wisest men could not explain the dreams, how could Egypt prepare for what was coming? And then, a memory returned. The chief cupbearer, serving Pharaoh's wine, suddenly recalled the prison. The young Hebrew, the one who had spoken truth when no one else could. Genesis chapter 41, verses 9 to 13 records his words. I do remember my faults this day. He confessed his past. The anger of Pharaoh that once cast him into prison. The night when both he and the baker dreamed. How a young Hebrew servant listened and gave each man the meaning of his dream. And it came to pass exactly as he had spoken. The cupbearer restored, the baker executed. Pharaoh leaned in, listening intently. A man who had proven true, where Egypt's wisest had failed. And this man, this Hebrew, was still in prison. The cupbearer described Joseph, honest, humble, giving credit to his God for every gift. So unlike the magicians who boasted of their own power. Without hesitation, Pharaoh gave the order. Bring him. After years of silence, waiting in darkness, Joseph's moment had come. The guards rushed to the prison. The command was urgent. Bring Joseph, the Hebrew prisoner, to the palace. Immediately, Joseph, faithfully managing the prison as he always had, suddenly received a summons. A command that shook him to the core. Pharaoh wanted to see him. He had no idea why, but he knew this much. When the ruler of Egypt called, you answered quickly and with respect. Genesis chapter 41 verse 14 tells us what happened next. Pharaoh sent for Joseph. They brought him out hastily from the dungeon. He shaved. He changed his clothing, and he came before Pharaoh. Joseph had been a prisoner for years. His beard had grown long, as was Hebrew custom. His hair was unkempt, his clothing rough and worn, the kind fit for captivity. But standing before Pharaoh required transformation. According to Egyptian custom, a man must appear clean-shaven, properly dressed, fully prepared. Joseph submitted to their rituals. He washed. He dressed in garments provided by the palace. Every detail mattered, because one misstep before Pharaoh could mean disgrace, even death. As Joseph walked through the corridors of Pharaoh's palace, his eyes must have widened. The wealth was staggering. Walls painted with gods and victories, floors polished stone, gold gleaming from every corner. How far he stood from the tents of Jacob. How different this world was from the house where he once served Potiphar. Now, Joseph entered the royal throne room, and there he stood, face to face with Pharaoh himself, the most powerful ruler of the ancient world. Seated on a magnificent throne, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, surrounded by officials, guards, and advisors. The atmosphere was thick with formality, every detail crafted to remind all present of Pharaoh's absolute power and his divine status in the religion of Egypt. Yet Joseph remained composed. Years of hardship had taught him to trust God's hand. Whether in Potiphar's house, in a prison cell, or now in Pharaoh's court, he carried the same humility, the same faith, the same integrity. Genesis chapter 41 verses 15 and 16 records the exchange. Pharaoh said, I have dreamed a dream, and none can interpret it. I have heard that you can understand and explain dreams. Joseph replied, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Joseph's words were humble. He made no claim to personal power, no boast of wisdom. He gave the honor fully to God, declaring that any interpretation would come from heaven, not from man. Pharaoh then described his dreams. 7 fat cows, consumed by 7 lean cows, 7 healthy ears of grain, swallowed by 7 withered ones. Joseph listened intently, and the meaning became clear. Genesis chapter 41 verses 25 to 27 gives Joseph's answer. The dream of Pharaoh is one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 good cows are 7 years. 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. Joseph revealed that 7 years of abundance were coming, years when Egypt would flourish, harvests overflowing, but after them, 7 years of famine. Not an ordinary dry season, a famine so severe that prosperity would be forgotten, consumed by desperation. Genesis chapter 41 verses 28 to 32 continues. This is what I told Pharaoh. God is showing Pharaoh what he will do. 7 years of plenty across Egypt, then 7 years of famine that will consume the land. The dream was repeated twice because the matter is established by God, and he will soon bring it to pass. The dreams carried both a warning and an opportunity. Egypt had been given advanced knowledge of what was coming. The choice now was how to respond. Joseph didn't stop at interpretation. He offered a plan. Let Pharaoh appoint a wise and discerning man over the land. Let him gather 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of plenty. Store it in the cities. Keep it under Pharaoh's authority, so that Egypt may not perish when the famine comes. It was bold. It was brilliant. 20% collected during abundance would sustain the nation through famine. Granaries in every city would secure food for the people. A centralized system would prevent corruption and waste. This was about more than survival. If Egypt endured while other nations starved, it would emerge stronger than before, wealthier, more powerful, more respected. When Joseph finished, the throne room fell silent. Pharaoh and his court sat stunned. They had heard confusion from their wise men, but Joseph's words carried clarity, purpose, strategy. Genesis chapter 41 verses 37 and 38 records the reaction of Pharaoh and his court. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his officials, and Pharaoh said to them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh was astonished, not only by Joseph's interpretation, but also by the wisdom that followed it. The plan Joseph presented made complete sense. It gave Egypt a pathway to turn disaster into prosperity. But what captured Pharaoh's heart wasn't intelligence alone. Pharaoh, though raised in the worship of Egyptian gods, recognized that Joseph carried insight that no ordinary man could possess. The dreams had been explained with clarity. The strategy was practical and complete, so much so that it felt like revelation from a higher source. Pharaoh's question to his advisors was more than curiosity. It was recognition. Where else could we find someone filled with the Spirit of God, like this young Hebrew? The officials knew their magicians had failed. They had no answers. Yet Joseph not only interpreted the dreams, he gave a detailed plan to face what was coming. This was beyond human skill. Genesis chapter 41 verse 39 records Pharaoh's conclusion. "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so wise and discerning as you." Pharaoh admitted what all had witnessed. Joseph's God had revealed both the meaning and the solution. This wasn't merely about Joseph's brilliance. It was about the God who revealed the future and how to survive it. Pharaoh understood something his priests could not. The God of the Hebrews had succeeded where Egyptian gods had failed. In that moment, Pharaoh made a decision that shocked the throne room. Joseph would not return to prison. He would not leave with a reward. Pharaoh placed this 30-year-old Hebrew in charge of executing the very plan he had proposed. Genesis chapter 41 verse 41 records the proclamation. "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people will submit to your word. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. I hereby place you over all Egypt." In a single moment, Joseph rose from prisoner to prime minister, the second most powerful man in Egypt, entrusted with authority over the entire kingdom. The symbols of this appointment carried weight. Genesis chapter 41, verse 42 and 43 says Pharaoh removed the signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He clothed him in garments of fine linen. He placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him the second royal chariot, and heralds cried before him, "Bow the knee." Joseph now carried Pharaoh's own authority. The ring was more than jewelry. It was Pharaoh's seal, the power to issue decrees in the king's name. The robes and chain marked Joseph as nobility. The royal chariot, rolling through the streets, declared his exalted position. And when the herald shouted, "Bow the knee," the people weren't honoring a foreign prisoner. They were recognizing the man who now ruled with Pharaoh's authority. Genesis chapter 41 verses 44 and 45 continues. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt." He gave Joseph an Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah, meaning revealer of secrets, or savior of the world. He also gave him Asenath, daughter of a prominent priest, as his wife. Joseph was now fully integrated into Egyptian society, standing at its highest levels of power. Genesis chapter 41 verse 46 highlights the detail. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. 13 years had passed since his brothers sold him into slavery at 17. 13 years of betrayal, false accusation, and imprisonment. Now, at 30, he stood at the pinnacle of power, prepared not only to save Egypt, but one day his own family. This new role placed Joseph in two worlds, his Hebrew identity and his Egyptian authority. His marriage into a priestly family connected him with the elite of Egyptian society, aligning him with the religious and political heart of the nation. Yet even as he embraced his new role, he never abandoned his faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph served Pharaoh faithfully while walking in integrity before his God. As prime minister, Joseph threw himself into the preparation for the coming famine. The 7 years of abundance unfolded exactly as God had revealed. The land produced in extraordinary measure, fields yielding handfuls, trees bending under their fruit, herds multiplying beyond count. Joseph organized storage centers in every major city, building granaries to hold the surplus. He created a system so vast it stretched across Egypt. He coordinated thousands of workers, countless facilities, and records that tracked every measure of grain. The abundance was so great that eventually they stopped trying to count. Granaries filled, more had to be built. Egypt's wealth swelled as the storehouses overflowed, yet Joseph never lost focus. He knew this prosperity was temporary. The real test lay ahead. While others celebrated the harvest, Joseph worked tirelessly, preparing for the famine that was certain to come. Egypt had been prepared for the disaster that God had revealed. As Joseph foretold, the 7 years of overflowing harvest came to a close, and soon the shadow of famine spread across the known world. The abundance was gone. Genesis chapter 41 verses 53 to 57 records it clearly. The years of plenty ended, and the years of scarcity began. Yet, while every land was struck by hunger, Egypt still had bread. When the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, his command was simple: go to Joseph. Whatever he tells you, do it. And so, Joseph opened the storehouses. Grain was sold to the Egyptians, and the famine grew heavier across the land. This famine was not confined to Egypt. It stretched across the Middle East, into Canaan itself, where Joseph's family still lived. Fields yielded nothing. Herds perished for lack of water. Starvation crept into every household. Jacob, weary from years of grief and now an old man past 100, faced this same trial. Genesis chapter 42 tells us, when he learned that Egypt had grain, he said to his sons, "Why do you stand looking at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there, buy for us, that we may live and not die." This decision was not simple. The road to Egypt was long, harsh, and dangerous. Carrying silver for trade made them targets for thieves. And once they reached Egypt, they would be foreigners, at the mercy of a powerful empire. So Jacob chose 10 of his sons to go, but Benjamin, the youngest, he kept at home. Benjamin was the only other son of Rachel, Joseph's full brother. After losing Joseph, Jacob could not bear the thought of risking him too. This revealed what the brothers had long known. Jacob's favoritism remained. Just as Joseph once had been, Benjamin was now the object of his father's fierce protection. The memory of Joseph's coat, Joseph's dreams, Joseph's betrayal, still lingered in their minds. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, they bowed before the governor of the land, Joseph himself. They did not know it was him. 22 years had passed since they sold him into slavery. The boy they betrayed now stood before them, second only to Pharaoh. Genesis chapter 42 describes the moment. They bowed with their faces to the earth, fulfilling the very dreams they once mocked. Yet Joseph, though he recognized them instantly, concealed his identity and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he demanded. They answered, "From Canaan, to buy food." They had no idea the one questioning them was the brother they assumed long dead. How could they have known? The 17-year-old they betrayed had become a 39-year-old Egyptian ruler, clean-shaven, clothed in fine linen, speaking a foreign tongue, surrounded by guards, authority, and power. The thought that this man could be Joseph never even crossed their minds. In their minds, Joseph was gone, lost to slavery, or to death itself. But here he stood, alive, powerful, and in full command of their fate. Joseph's sharp words were not cruelty. They were time to steady his heart, time to weigh his next steps. After 2 decades of separation, anguish, and unanswered questions, the very brothers who betrayed him stood kneeling at his feet. And then, Joseph remembered. He remembered the dreams, the sheaves bowing down, the stars honoring him. Here it was, fulfilled before his eyes. But Joseph needed to test them. Had they changed? Or were they the same men who once despised him? He accused them. "You are spies. You have come to see the weakness of this land." The brothers protested desperately. "No, my lord. We are honest men, sons of one father. We were 12 in number. The youngest remains with our father, and one is no more." One is no more. The words struck Joseph deeply. They believed him dead. They still mourned, yet carried on. And in their defense, they revealed what Joseph longed to know. Benjamin was alive. Their father, too, was still living. For 22 years, Joseph had wondered about them. Now, in their own words, answers came. But still he needed proof. Were they truly changed? Or merely telling a story to survive? So, Joseph declared a test. "By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave unless your youngest brother comes here. One of you shall go to fetch him. The rest shall remain confined until your words are proven true." And with that, he cast them into prison for 3 days. 3 days to reflect, 3 days to wonder, 3 days for Joseph to watch and listen. What Joseph heard during those 3 days would reveal everything, whether his brothers had truly changed, or if they were still the same cruel, selfish men who had once sold him into slavery. After 3 days, Joseph adjusted his plan, yet kept the pressure firm. Genesis chapter 42 verses 18 to 20 records his words. "On the 3rd day Joseph said, 'Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one brother remain confined, while the rest carry grain for your starving households. But bring your youngest brother back to me, so your words will be proven, and you will not die.' So instead of imprisoning 9 men and sending one home, Joseph chose to hold only one brother, while the other 9 returned to Canaan, carrying food their families desperately needed. Mercy balanced with wisdom, yet his demand remained unshaken. Benjamin must be brought to Egypt. And what unfolded next pierced deep into Joseph's heart. Genesis chapter 42, verses 21 and 22, records their private exchange. The brothers said, "We are guilty concerning our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered, "Did I not warn you? Do not sin against the boy." But you would not listen. Now his blood is required of us. Speaking in Hebrew, they assumed the Egyptian ruler could not understand, but Joseph did. And in their words, he heard the guilt that had weighed on them for over 20 years. They remembered his cries when they cast him into the pit. They believed their suffering now was God's judgment for their cruelty. Genesis chapter 42, verse 24 says, "Joseph turned away from them and wept. Overwhelmed, he stepped aside to compose himself. For the first time, he knew his brothers had carried this remorse for decades. Joseph then chose Simeon, binding him before their eyes, perhaps because Simeon had been among the fiercest against him long ago. Genesis chapter 42, verses 25 and 26, records Joseph's command, "Fill their sacks with grain, return every man's silver to his bag, and give them provisions for the journey." Not only did he supply food, he returned their payment in secret. This generosity, hidden inside their grain sacks, was both a blessing and a test. When the brothers returned and told Jacob everything, the old patriarch was shattered. "Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you would take Benjamin? All these things are against me." Reuben tried to reassure him, saying, "Put Benjamin in my hands. If I fail to bring him back, you may take my own sons." But Jacob refused. He could not bear to lose Rachel's other son. He had already endured 22 years of grief for Joseph. The thought of losing Benjamin crushed him further. Genesis chapter 43, verses 1 and 2 says, "The famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten all the grain, their father said, 'Go back and buy us a little food.' Finally, Jacob agreed to send Benjamin. He said, Genesis chapter 43, verses 11 and 12, "Take the best of our land as a gift, balm, honey, spices, myrrh, nuts, and almonds. Take double the silver, and return the money found in your sacks." And when they arrived in Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph saw his only full brother for the first time in more than 20 years. Genesis chapter 43, verses 29 and 30 says, "He lifted his eyes and saw Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, 'God be gracious to you, my son.' And Joseph hurried out, for his heart burned within him, and he wept in his chamber." Benjamin was more than a brother. He was the son of Rachel, the only other child of Joseph's beloved mother. Memories of childhood flooded his soul. Joseph feasted with his brothers, but he still did not reveal himself. There remained one last test. Genesis chapter 44, verses 1 and 2 records Joseph's command, "Fill their sacks with food, put every man's silver back, and place my silver cup in the youngest brother's sack." Joseph's steward pursued them, accusing them of theft. The silver cup planted in Benjamin's bag would be the ultimate test. Would the brothers abandon Benjamin, just as they had abandoned Joseph years before? Or had they finally changed, choosing loyalty and protection over betrayal? And the brothers were brought back to face Joseph. After the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, the brothers were crushed with grief. Genesis chapter 44, verses 13 to 16 describes how they tore their garments, loaded their donkeys, and returned to the city. When they came before Joseph, they fell to the ground in despair. Joseph asked them, "What is this you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can see such things?" Judah responded with brokenness, "What can we say, my lord? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered our guilt. We are your servants, both we and the one with whom the cup was found." The brothers were ready to suffer together, refusing to abandon Benjamin. This was a complete change from 22 years earlier, when they had sold Joseph to save themselves. Judah, The very one who once suggested selling Joseph now offered himself as a substitute, willing to take Benjamin's place. Genesis chapter 44 verses 18 to 34 records Judah's passionate appeal. He explained that Jacob's life was bound to Benjamin's and that the old man would die of grief if Benjamin did not return. His words revealed transformation. The brothers now cared more for their father's heart and their family's unity than their own freedom. Joseph could no longer contain his emotions. Genesis chapter 45 verses 1 to 3 tells us, Joseph cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." Only his brothers remained. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians and even Pharaoh's household heard it. Then Joseph declared, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers stood speechless, overwhelmed with fear. The brother they thought was dead was not only alive, but was now ruler over all Egypt. They were completely at his mercy. But Joseph's first words were not words of vengeance. They were words of grace. Genesis chapter 45 verses 4 to 8 records his response. "Come closer. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves. God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." Joseph explained that for 2 years, famine had gripped the land, with 5 more still to come. God had placed him in Egypt to save lives and preserve his family's future. He reminded them, "It was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me a father to Pharaoh, lord over his household, and ruler of Egypt." Joseph saw that God had used even their betrayal for a greater purpose. Their sin had been real, but God's plan was stronger. Through pain and injustice, God positioned Joseph to bring deliverance. Genesis chapter 45 verses 14 and 15 shows the reunion. Joseph embraced Benjamin, weeping on his neck. Then he kissed all his brothers, and they wept together. The years of separation, guilt, and silence were washed away in forgiveness and reconciliation. Immediately, Joseph made plans to bring his entire family to Egypt. Genesis chapter 45 verses 9 to 11 records his urgent words. "Hurry, go to my father and say, 'God has made me lord of Egypt. Come down without delay. You and your children, your flocks and herds, will dwell near me in Goshen. I will provide for you, for 5 years of famine remain.'" The land of Goshen was the best pasture land, perfect for Jacob's herds. Joseph's invitation was not only about survival, but about God fulfilling his covenant to Abraham, making his descendants a great nation. Joseph's story reminds us that no betrayal, no pain, and no loss is wasted in the hands of God. What others mean for harm, God can transform for good. If Joseph's journey speaks to you today, let it stir your heart to trust God's faithfulness. Share this message of hope with someone who may need it right now. You never know how your act of sharing could become the very encouragement that pulls another soul out of despair. Remember this truth. Whatever pit you find yourself in, God is preparing a palace for you. Your story is not finished yet. Like Joseph, your future is still unfolding, shaped by the hand